Alright, today we're going to be looking at advantages and disadvantages for the North and South during the American Civil War. And we're going to start off with the advantages for the North. And their biggest advantage, or one of the biggest advantages they have, is simply their population size. It's nearly 4 times as large as the free South, the South, the free population in the South anyway. And which means they're just going to have a lot more people to draw from as far as soldiers are concerned, and then also just citizens that can help in other aspects of the war effort. As you can see there, they're much more industrialized, a lot more railroads, and they have a navy, not just a navy, but a strong navy and a large fleet of trading ships, just a much larger in every aspect as far as the Navy is concerned. And this next picture kind of shows a great example of the ways that the North, some of the advantages that the North has. Okay, so this picture is just really a great example of how the industrialized North just has an advantage, because you probably look at this picture and you're like, what in the world is this guy and this guy? What are they doing? Are they just, they just enjoy sitting on top of poles? Well, no. They are actually putting up telegraph lines. And so the telegraph is a big part of the one of the advantages that the North has. They're able to set up these telegraph lines and communicate all across the nation, really, and back with Washington, D.C., with Abraham Lincoln, and what's going on in these battles and the progress. And so they can get very quick information, which to us seems, well, that's just the way wars are fought. You know what's going on instantly. Well, that was not the way the wars were fought before this. And now with the telegraph, information is transmitted almost immediately. And so this is a huge advantage for the North. The South, as we've talked about a little bit in the past, South has some serious advantages. Their advantages, in some ways, are more significant because what they're trying to accomplish is not actually as complicated. The South is fighting a defensive war, which they don't have to win. They don't have to make the North do something. They just have to not lose. They simply have to continue fighting. Because the North, their goal is to try to get the South to say, we're still a part of the United States. And to get a group of people to do something that they don't really want to do is not easy. They're trying to say, here, you have to follow the laws of the United States. And if the people of the South don't want to follow the laws of the United States anymore, if they want to form their own government, you have to physically force them to do that. And the South is a huge area, and to physically try to make each area, each state, remain loyal to the United States is just very difficult. So the North, they're trying to get the South to give up, to break the will of the South, basically, and the South is simply trying to get the North to leave them alone. If the South can make the war painful enough for the people in the North to say, you know what, it's not worth it, just let them be, then the South will win. And this is kind of the same problem. Anytime that the United States or any other country invades another country, this is the problem they have. How do you get this other country to do something that they don't want to do? And so this is, in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is part of the problem that we've had. Now, in certain parts of Iraq and Afghanistan, the United States was welcomed and they were glad they were here, but in other parts they certainly weren't, and they were very upset about it and would do anything to keep the United States out. And so the struggles that we had in those countries are very similar to the kinds of struggles that the United States had in trying to force the South to remain part of the United States. Here you can see, graphically, the difference in the North and the South. Just look at this, the population. Pardon the interruption. So in this you can see, the total population for the North is much greater. The factory production, they're going to be that's a massive advantage. The railroad mileage you see there, and then the farmland. And the farmland, that one's the one that might be a little bit hard to imagine or hard to believe because we think of the South as agricultural. But if you notice that cotton production is not included in that, therefore you realize, okay, wait a second, this farmland they're talking about is farmland that is used to grow food. And the North grows a lot more food than the South does. The South is almost all cotton production, and if it's not cotton production, there's a good chance it's tobacco production, and relatively small amount of other types of produce is being grown in the South. And so the big advantage for the Southern resources is they're all of the cotton production. Almost all the cotton production is in the South, and so that is going to shape their strategy in trying to fight the North. The North has some disadvantages, and you'll notice these disadvantages kind of line up really well with the advantages of the other side. So the North, their disadvantage is that they're having to conquer a huge area. They're having to go into the South and convince the South to stay part of the United States, and so they're having to completely break the entire will of the Southern population, basically, and conquer this huge area. They're also invading an unfamiliar land, which means they don't know the land as well as those people that are in the South. And because they're trying to invade the South to get the South to do something they don't want, they are going to have very long supply lines. Soldiers, they like to eat every day, kind of just like the rest of us. Preferably at least 2 meals a day, if not 3 meals a day. And if you're talking about tens of thousands of soldiers, that's lots of meals. If you've invaded into the South for just a few days, and that you've got just 10,000. Just think of the number of meals that have to be transported. Not to mention all of the weapons, all of the ammunition that has to be transported. You're talking about that very long supply lines. And the deeper into the South, the further those things have to be transported. And then the North suffers from poor military leadership, especially early in the war. Not so much from President Lincoln, but just the commanders, the generals in charge of the Northern Army they're not aggressive enough. That's the big problem. They don't attack. And so they suffer from a lack of strong military leadership. And in this picture you see what I was talking about, the long supply lines. I mean, this is you can see the supply wagons all the way over here, and then all the way at the end of the horizon you still see these supplies coming. And that's just one example. You've got to defend your supply lines because you're sending supplies down into the South. Well, if those aren't defended, then the South lacks supplies. Where are they going to get them from? They're going to get them from these supply lines, and so it's a big disadvantage to have to send supplies down into the South. The South's disadvantages. They have a small population. They don't have many factories, so they're not going to be able to produce the supplies they need. They have basically no navy, very few trading ships, few railroads, so transporting supplies and troops is going to be slow. And then also the type of government they have a confederacy doesn't lend itself to making decisive action. Each state kind of has their own rules and wants to assert their rights, not giving up too many rights to the Confederate government, and therefore there's not a strong, powerful, centralized government, which is one of the problems they had with the United States government. And so that was all fine and good for a type of government, except when you're trying to fight a war, when you need decisive action being taken by a national government, and that's going to be difficult. These states don't work well together because they want to assert their rights. And the basic strategies. Each side has a strategy to win the war. The Union's strategy is to, let's just look over at this picture when we'll talk about the Union strategy in a minute. I'll go ahead and start talking about the Southern strategy first. They're, as I said before, they're fighting a defensive war. They just have to get the North so tired of fighting the war that they give up. And their other big goal is they expected Europeans, countries to recognize them, to the Confederacy as an independent nation, recognize them, therefore trading with them, and the South would then be able to trade all their huge supplies of cotton that they're not going to be trading with the North anymore with these European countries, which will supply the South with the supplies that they need and money that they need. This doesn't work out. Great Britain has actually been stockpiling cotton, and not only that, they're able to get cotton from Egypt at this time, and so they're not as quick. These European countries aren't as quick to side with the Confederacy as they had hoped, and therefore this part of the plan does not work out nearly as well as they had hoped. The part that does work out is they're fighting a defensive war, and that's what makes the war last so long and make it part of what makes it such a bloody fight. And then here we can see the northern strategy, which is really a blockade. You can see all these ships all along the coast, and they're going to be blockading any ports in the South. This blockade is not terribly effective early in the war, but as the war progresses, 1863, 1864, and 1865, this blockade becomes more and more successful. The South has a harder and harder time getting ships in and out of these ports. There are blockade runners that, with fast, small ships that try to get out of these ports before the U.S. Navy could capture them or stop them and take their goods and then return. Once again, have to run through the blockade on the return with European supplies. That's not terribly successful. Later in the war, they have a lot of difficulty accomplishing that. The other goal is to gain control of the Mississippi River. If they can gain the Mississippi River, they've divided the South. You've got Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, Tennessee all on one side, and Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas are on the other side. And so you've divided the country. And then the other goal is to capture Richmond, which is the capital, the southern capital. Once you do that, they feel like they've got a good chance. You can also see another part of it is to then attack into the heart of the South, and they do that as well. They do that actually before they end up capturing Richmond. Capturing Richmond is kind of the very last, one of the last things they do before the war is over. So that's just a quick summary of the advantages and disadvantages for both the North and the South, and basically the goals of each side as well during this war.